So it is August now. Crazy. Summer's going by too fast. Haven't even had any real time off to speak of. Had a few days here and there. Not good enough. But the main reason for this post is because fish disease, biosecurity. Now, a lot of anglers don't even know what that means. And you can't blame them. They just want to go fishing and catch loads of fish. There's a few things they need to understand. One, the warmer it gets, the more stressed that the fish you catch are. So the more high the temperature gets, you're going to go, oh, it's nice, I'm going to go fishing. But also, when you catch a fish, it's going to be a lot more stress. Now, when a fish is stressed, much like anything that's living, if you put it under stress, it's going to be more susceptible to picking up bacterial infections, viruses, everything. Simply because anything that's stressed has a lower defense mechanism. So, and this has been the bane of my life for the last 30 years. So, if you are in a commercial fishery and you are allowed to use a keep net, in the winter, when fishing is quite difficult, simply because fish don't need to feed as much, and there's less fishermen about because it's cold and they don't like going out in the cold, then you really genuinely can get away with more because the fish are less stressed, simply because of science, because cold water holds more oxygen, and the fish, doesn't matter what species, we're not talking about species specific here, they are less prone to all manner of stress, and stress is what initially kicks off all these problems. If a fish is stressed, it stops feeding, and then if it stops feeding, it has all sorts of issues. If you stick it in a keep net for 5-6 hours or 2 or 3 hours in 20 degrees water temperature, just because it swims off at the end of that, that's just like saying, honestly, it's just like someone coming back from the army, from a war, from a brutal war, and they obviously have PTSD because they've seen horrible things. And you say, well, he got back, he's fine, he's got a job, he's fine. We have no problem, I have to worry about him. And then he goes nuts, and the rest of his life's ruined. It's a poor analogy, but it's the weekend now. But it's relative, and anglers don't, in general, understand that. And match anglers and pleasure moan at carp anglers and vice versa. Now, the bare minimum you have to understand is match anglers are trying to catch lots of fish, stick them in a keep net while I'm at the end, which is bad. We get asked to do a lot of fishery surveys in the summer, and I always say no. Even back in the day when I was, up and coming, learning to do this, and you could really do with the income in the summer, and you could easily, yeah, it's fine. And the company I worked for when I was a kid, they did stuff in the summer. I was, no. And I said no, because when the higher the increase in water temperature, the decrease in oxygen and the stress, no, it's not worth it. And I even noticed the EA doing surveys in the summer because they're not allowed to go out in the winter and do certain things. And that's all just legislation predominantly brought on by health and safety and just nonsense. Now, I don't profess to know everything, but I've grown up in this industry and it's all I've ever done for 30 odd years. And I know for a fact that I'm happy, very happy to undertake fish movements and fishery surveys in the wintertime when the water temperature is lower and the fish are tough and strong and they're not really feeding very much and they're not breeding. They're just tough. Anyone in the industry knows this. So in the summer, and I wouldn't have a problem, if we were doing a survey on a lake and it was cold, sub 8 degrees water temperature, and a client said, oh, can I store the fish in some keep nets for it? I'd go, yeah, okay. So we grade them, stick them in. They'll be fine for a few hours because it's cold. And that is a huge thing. But no one goes fishing in the cold. In the summertime when it's warm and you're trying to ram hundreds of pounds weight of fish in a keep net, as an angler you think, look at me, I'm Billy Big Bollocks, I've caught 500-600 pounds of fish. People in the industry are going, oh Christ, here we go. for me, it's just personally painful to see this sort of thing. And some people argue and say, oh, if you go fishing, accept it. It's like, well, no, because it's like in any industry, it's like you have to have high standards and best practice. And best practice, in my opinion, is looking after every single fish you want to catch. And that is why there has been a decline in match fisheries and match fishing venues. You might argue with that, but I've seen it personally. I mean, I travel the country visiting fisheries daily, probably more than most, you know, and I don't ever go anywhere that's converting from a commercial, from a pleasure fishery or carp fishery or holiday venue, going, oh, you know what, I want to do matches now and charge £8 to £10 a day and let people come onto my fishery and catch tons of it. I don't get that, but what I do get is the alternative. I get the opposite, if you like. I get a lot of commercial match fishers going, I've had enough of this. It's ridiculous. They're never happy. Oh, they're moaning they can't catch £100, but they can go and do it up the road. Don't bother them. And there's so many different income streams from lakes and fisheries. Now, as anglers, you know, it's very nice to go and catch some fish, but I never had it in me to go and try and catch £100 plus of fish and stick them in nets, because I just didn't. And carp fishing's just as bad. It's got its own foibles. The fact that when someone catches 2 or 3 fish and they like to show off these pictures of 2 or 3 fish in you know, retainers now. It used to be sacks. Oh, look at me, look what I've had during the night, all these sacks. That is just as bad as putting all these fish in a keep net. And we have to be responsible. I'm sorry, we have to. And this isn't an angler's plea or a Greta Thunberg type, oh, we shouldn't do it. This is from someone who's worked in fisheries my entire career, seeing it from grassroots, from the bottom levels, from the sheer, you know, just the horrible things that. It's all I've ever done. It's not like I'm an angler who goes fishing on a weekend, or it's not like I'm a full-time angler who goes fishing every day. It's not like I'm a match angler who goes fishing and is sponsored. I'm none of those things. I'm someone who's worked and lived this industry since I was 16 years old. Nothing else. I've done nothing else. This is my job. This is my living. This is my whole career. And I'm saying now that we have to be more responsible with the fish we're catching. And part of that is the fact that in years to come we're going to have less water, as in less rainfall, less water, less good quality water. The rivers are getting polluted by the government basically because they don't care. So river water is going to get more and more polluted, and fenced environments and lakes are going to be more important for diverse ecosystems and diverse fishing and angling. And you can all argue as much as you like, saying carp fishermen or this and match fishermen and that, but at the end of the day, I tell you, I honestly predict within 50 years fishing's going to be there'll be gated, closed, private communities where there's a fishing lake and you can't get in, and it's for the few. And unfortunately, I genuinely believe that's going to happen, simply because we have to protect these things. And when I mean fenced and gated, I mean from everybody. I think in future, the more that these government agencies try and restrict what everyone's doing, it will push the privateers into, hang on, I know what's going on. I need to stop everyone coming in. It's very difficult when you've got lakes that have a feed from a river that are completely reliant on water coming in from another source. I'd be worried. I'd be like, well, it's out of my control. Who's dealing with the water up there? Then I'd be concerned. I'd be like, well, that's out of my control. If polluted water comes in, then it could ruin my fishery. So yeah, there's an awful lot of things that need to be addressed, and no one's really willing to do much about it because no one really looks further than the next 5 to 10 years, in government certainly, and policy certainly. And my concern is the fact that the more bickering and internal nonsense that goes on, because there's a lot of immaturity when it comes to fisheries, especially with anglers. We all need to unite, and I think the Angling Trust has done a good job. We've seen, you know, corporate, all sorts of things tried to come and go over the last 30 years. Different organisations saying, "Oh, this is what we need to do for the benefit of fisheries in the UK." And the Anglican Trust has done a good job. I think it's. I'm always independent. I remain savagely independent. I've always been approached by various different organisations to try and be involved. I've always been very independent when it comes to my views, because I think I have to be to offer my honest opinion, which some people won't hold valid, but others do. So what I think is going to happen is the rivers are going to keep declining, and it's no fault of angling clubs in the main. Obviously sometimes it is, but the majority of the time it's because there's no funding available, there's no help available, because the government don't care. Angling and the rivers are way down on the list, and if you've only got to look at the profits that the water boards are making and the shit they're pumping in the rivers, they get away with it. There's clearly backhanders, and there's clearly corruption and all that. It's like, how can you get £1 million bonus for dumping shit in the river? I don't know, but that is what we're dealing with. So I genuinely believe that a lot of the time the rivers are going to be in a worse state than the lakes, which I think is sad, because you rely on the government ultimately to protect the rivers, and it doesn't matter how hard as an angling club you might work to protect your river network and your fish. If you're not getting the support from the government to protect the water quality coming into your river, there's nothing it's out of your hands. So and it's the same on a lake. If you're relying on inlets, someone else up the source, further up, could be having a detrimental effect on your water quality. So I'm very concerned about all this. However, if you've got a gated private water with either spring-fed or naturally fed water, which is isolated, then you've got every opportunity to make that absolutely perfect, because you've got no outside influence. Then I would shut the gates, lock the gates, and really limit what you're doing. And that is, in my opinion, why so many venues now are going private. Syndicates or bookings or exclusive bookings. You can't blame them. They want more control, and that's what I'd want. I'd want complete control, or as much control as possible, so you limit who comes on. It's up to you who's fishing your venues at any one time, and then what water's coming in, going out, etc., etc. And it's sad, really, to have to go down those routes, but that is definitely the right thing to do. So yeah, every year it gets worse. We don't have enough rain, and then we have too much, and then people moan, and there's too many excuses. I just think you have to plan forward, plan ahead. I mean, as a country and as a planet, we probably need to be creating more reservoirs to store rainwater, because all very well going, we have floods and droughts. Well, during the flood you need to store the water, and then during the drought you have enough water. But no one's going to do that, because the government doesn't care any more than 5 to 10 years looking ahead. Look at HS2. That's probably not even going to get completed now. But in my opinion, it was a cash dump, and also a place where you could say, look, we've employed, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people for that period. So whoever was in, it's like, we've just employed loads of people. I don't see it getting finished. So the older I get, the more sceptical I get, and I think no one is looking forward. No one ever cares beyond a few years' time. And whenever I go to a client's venue or a lake, I look at it and think, right, how's this going to look in 10 years? So that's the first question they ask. I ask them, I said, are you going to keep this? Are you going to sell it? Are you going to rent it? What's going on? What do you want to do with it? And then you can plan working with the client, plan ahead. And it's really important, because 10 years flies by. It really does. So the point of my nonsense rambling today is the fact that you can't just look, 10 years flies by, so you can't just look at what's happening now and go, I'll just wait for a problem and bodge it. In any aspect of fishery management, you have to look ahead and go, what can I do now to cement and safeguard this particular water for the future? And there are things you can do, but not enough people are. Everyone's living for the moment, and I love that in my personal life. I love living for the moment, but from a business point of view, you have to look forward and think, what am I going to do? And from a fishery, when you're dealing with nature, you've got to look at the climate and look at the immediate impact of what's going on, and think, how can I future-proof my water? How can I future-proof my fishery? And there's loads of ways you can do that. And a lot of those things are site-specific. But as an angling club or as a private fishery, if all you're doing is listening to anglers and buying fish every year, that's never been the way forward, and it never will be. And you will eventually come unstuck. So that is today's rant over.